Shah Jahan made the Taj Mahal as a final resting place for his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal. And then when he was imprisoned by his own son at the Agra fort, he would look at the Taj Mahal and feel happy from his jail cell. It would remind him of the undying love that he shared for the best wife he had of the 7 in total. Now, I don't know how that works, but this was in the 1500s. In 2024, if Shah Jahan was still alive, he would have been sadder because he wouldn't have been able to see the Taj Mahal because of all the pollution. Actually, no. He would have probably died along with Mumtaz Mahal way sooner due to either carbon monoxide poisoning, COPD, bronchitis, heart failure, because the air in India is literally unbreathable. India does not have clean air anymore. Millions of people are dying and the government doesn't care at all. And honestly, why should the government care? Because citizens like you and I don't seem to care either. But let me give you a shocking number that you should care about. In India, every day, 464 children die due to air pollution. Not every month or every year, every day. And every single year, almost 21 million people die in India due to air pollution. That is 10% of the population of Mumbai city. Now, if you live in India, you might think that, wait, every winter we see all these headlines about pollution, but all of them are about Delhi, our national capital. All the other cities are safe, right? Because every year, Delhi sets new records for air pollution. For example, this year, one day in Delhi was equivalent to smoking 49 cigarettes. The air quality index in that city reached more than 1000. And I'll give you some context. Below 50 is considered to be healthy and above 100 is considered to be moderately polluted. Now, let's say you live in Mumbai and you see that the air quality index is 150. So it's not as bad as 1000, right? It means we're all safe. I mean, the index says moderately polluted. How bad can it be? Let me tell you something. 150 or 1000, they are both deadly. They're equal. And when you hear that one line, that 1000 and 150 are equal, it sounds like bullshit, but let me prove it to you with data that it's not. Every time that we want to measure air pollution, we use the air quality index, and as soon as it crosses 100, we should start being concerned. There was a study done by the famous medical journal, The Lancet, which showed two shocking findings. Firstly, even short-term exposure to AQI above 100 was considered to be fatal. This is lower than India's national average. For context, in 2023, our entire country's average AQI was 147, which made us the third most polluted country in the world. If you look at other countries' government websites, they've started to give out travel advisories which caution people against going to India because it could be harmful to their respiratory health. And if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that this study said short-term exposure to AQI above 100. We live in AQI above 150 for the entire year. This has become a national emergency. Now, in order to measure AQI, we try to find out how many small toxic particles called PM2.5 are floating in the air. We measure this in micrograms per meter cube, which means if we have a cube whose side is 1 meter long and we fill it up with air from India, then we try to understand how many micrograms of toxic particles are inside this cube. Now, if that cube has 10 micrograms of shit particles that could kill us, we say that the PM2.5 concentration is 10 micrograms per meter cube. Now, the World Health Organization recommends that the PM2.5 concentration should not exceed 15. I'll give you 3 seconds to take a wild guess where India is at. We have reached 10.9 times the WHO recommendation of 15. And the second finding of that study would blow your mind and maybe convince you that this is a national emergency. It showed that just a 10 microgram increase in the PM2.5 concentration led to a 1.4% increase in the daily mortality rate of India, which literally means the probability that you die any given day due to air pollution. And the same study led to a shocking conclusion that nearly 7.2% of all daily deaths happened because the PM2.5 concentrations were more than 15 micrograms. Let that sink in for a moment. Just 15 micrograms. That is lighter than any politician or bureaucrat's ego. Recently, people were blaming the wrong person for this pollution. Primarily the farmers in the states of Rajasthan, Punjab and Haryana. The reason being, these farmers burn the stubble of their crop. What that means is every time they complete a harvest, there is some residue left and they can either remove this manually with a machine or simply choose to burn it off. Now, the reason they burn it is because it's the fastest and cheapest way, and most importantly, they have hardly any time left before the winter crops need to be planted. They get about 45 to 60 days between the months of September and November, and during this period, they can either use high-powered machinery to remove this residue, which is obviously very expensive and most farmers cannot afford it, or they can remove this manually, which would obviously take way longer than 45 to 60 days. So you simply take a lighter and toss it into your farm and get done with it. But obviously that causes a lot of pollution. All of that smoke travels hundreds of kilometers to the nearby cities and totally screws up the AQI. But now there's a genius solution here, right? You could simply choose to plant your crops way sooner so that between the summer harvest and the winter plantation, you have extra time left where you could manually remove this stubble without causing any pollution. The state governments in these places have enacted laws to make sure that the farmers only plant their seeds during the monsoon so that the water requirement of the entire state is lower due to the rains. If you plant these seeds in the summer, you would have to do the irrigation manually, and that would put a lot of pressure on the water supply of those states. So for a second, think of it from the farmer's perspective. You cannot plant your seeds earlier, you do not have the money to get the equipment, so the fastest way left is to burn the stubble. But guess what? On paper, our country banned the burning of stubble nearly 10 years ago. Things like legislature, enforcement, accountability is so messed up in India that when BBC interviewed this farmer from Punjab, he said that stubble burning was illegal, and in spite of that, the Supreme Court ordered the state government to pay 2,400 rupees to every single farmer who did not burn stubble. Think about that for a second. The Supreme Court ordered the government to actually reward a person from not breaking the law and not doing something that is already illegal. It's like telling the people of a city to not kill each other, which is already an illegal thing to do, in order to claim a reward. And the worst part is that so many farmers chose to actually not burn the stubble and claim this 2,400 rupees. But at the end of the year, the state government said that, you know what, we don't have any money left. So there's this big mess that we are in. We need better water management so that the farmers can plant the seeds whenever they like, and we need a sensible rationalization of all these farming laws such that they help the farmers. But that's the thing, all of these things are a politician or a bureaucrat's nightmare. They are time consuming, they involve real work, and they actually benefit someone. And of course, navigating things like irrigation, legislature, and farmers' rights involves dealing with a lot of unions which also serve as vote banks. The government knew that getting into this problem involved a lot of planning, so let's just stay away. And as a consequence, nearly 25 to 30% of all pollution that happens in the northern parts of India happens due to stubble burning. Based on everything you heard so far, think about it for one little second. Is it really the farmer's fault or the fault of those that you and I elected to power? And obviously, as seasons change, the direction of wind changes, this smoke travels to all the other cities as well and worsens the already terrible air pollution there. Pay attention to that word, already terrible air pollution. With or without stubble burning, we are still very polluted, and the reason behind that is even worse. Unpaved roads with loose soil release a lot of fine particles in the air that makes this pollution even worse. India has the second largest road network in the entire world, and 30% of this is unpaved. Mumbai, the richest, most populated city of India, the city that houses the most number of millionaires and billionaires of the country, had a concretization order that was passed by the government. The completion of this order would have significantly improved the pollution scenario in the city, but after 16 months of the order being passed, only 9% of the work was completed. And when questioned, the authorities played a blame game. They gave the most outrageous excuses like traffic, population, the lack of permissions and clearances, and the work is still unfinished. And when held slightly accountable for a change, shocking things came to light. The Minister for Forest, Environment and Climate Change, Mr. Bhupender Yadav, disclosed in Parliament that nearly 334 crore rupees were spent on the Delhi NCR cities. That's almost $4 million that was spent over the past 5 years on just 6 cities. And in spite of that, not a single day of clean air was achieved in Delhi. And for some weird reason, people don't seem to understand that this is a national health emergency. It has to be an election issue. You'll accuse me of being political, but I'm really not. Let's look at the facts. If you run a search for the word pollution on the Indian Prime Minister's Twitter handle, then you would just see 2 tweets over the past 6 years, and one of them was to wish you Happy World Environment Day. And similarly, if you run a search for the name of any religious community, then well, I've lost count. But keep in mind, the Prime Minister was just an example given that he's the head of the country. There is hardly any politician that is talking about this. And nobody seems to realize that pollution affects you so much more if you are poor. For someone with a lot of privilege, air purifiers, air conditioners at home, a fancy car that takes them to office, which also has a bunch of air purifiers, it doesn't pinch as much. But for the average middle class person who uses public transport to commute for 2 to 3 hours every single day, it could pose serious risks. For your auto drivers and delivery partners who are out in the sun for more than 12 to 14 hours a day, it is even worse. And when you look at the homeless, well, they live outside. The average Indian person has no clue what they are breathing and what dark surprise awaits them. In fact, Palki Sharma from First Post put it so beautifully.
In the new parliament, even that is not necessary because the building has an inbuilt air purifying process. All of it, by the way, funded by you and me.
Despite the air being so bad in India and air purifiers now becoming a necessity, they are taxed at the standard goods and services tax rate of 18%. We are currently being tortured by terrible air, and the politicians of the country only seem to be caring about freebies and religion politics. And I know what you're thinking. Is it even possible to fix this issue given the huge population that we have? Because every time you talk about any issue on any social media platform, there's always that one person who would come and tell you.
यार बट एक चीज देखो ना, इंडिया की पॉपुलेशन भी तो कितनी ज्यादा है, उससे भी तो फर्क पड़ता है ना.
Let's look at China, a country with almost the same population as India, and they too had a situation where all of their cities looked like Delhi. But at that time, through its program for change, the Chinese government declared a war on pollution. They used things like green financing. What that means is providing financing and interest rate subsidies to all of the projects that in some way or the other improve the environment and the pollution scenario. They spent nearly $1.3 billion on 27 sub-projects. They installed equipments that reduced the amount of sulfurs and nitrites in the air. Under this program, they replaced coal with natural gas wherever possible, which reduced their dependency on the non-renewable source, which creates so much pollution. And despite having a population of 1.4 billion people, which is almost the same as India, and 10 years back it was more than the population of India, China was successfully able to combat air pollution and bring their AQI below 100. Compared to 2013, in 2021, China was able to reduce its PM 2.5 concentrations by 58%. The only way we could do something like China is if we take this issue just as seriously as we take things like freebies and religion. Clean air has become a luxury and it does not have to be this way. In fact, in October 2024, the Supreme Court upheld that clean air is a constitutional right and every single person needs to get it. But here's the thing, the Supreme Court upheld it and politicians chose to ignore it because that wasn't something that gets them votes. And if it has to be something that gets them votes, you and I need to make this a national issue. We need to treat this as an emergency, which eventually goes to become an election issue. You need to speak up and educate everyone that 200 AQI is not normal. It's not something that you take lightly. Think of the outrage and backlash that would occur if a country in the West had AQI above 200. Act now, and if you learned something new from this video, leave a like, share it ahead, and subscribe for more.